Okay, Grandma, go ahead. The day after you got married, where did you stay?
The day after we got married, we went just visiting around Salt Lake. And then we went up to Ogden and stayed with my mother and dad from Friday or Saturday until Tuesday. And Tuesday I packed a suitcase and left to go to Portland, Oregon.
Uh-huh.
And that's where Gordon's ship was stationed. At the time he was on the USS Knox. He was the only Mormon besides one boy by the name of one officer by the name of Newell Bowman. And I met his wife at the time, so she became my very best friend. And Jean Ann and I have been friends for all these years. However, Newell died quite a few years before Gordon did. From Portland, we went to San Francisco, and we was in San Francisco for about 2 weeks before the USS Knox sailed and left to go pick up troops on the way back. They took troops in the war and landed them on the different islands. And then they went back and would pick up a load of troops and bring home, and then he'd go back and pick up another one. And they happened to be at Iwo Jima when they raised the flag, and they got to see them raise that flag when the war, and that meant then that the war was over. And he said it was a very happy jubilee, and they had to stay there for 2 or 3 days until everything got so they could pick up troops. So then for about the next 2 or 3 weeks, they kept going back and forth to pick up the troops to bring back, and they'd bring them back into San Francisco. Mm-hmm. From there, I went with Jean Ann, and I can't exactly remember what city we was in, to California. And I stayed there until about October. And in October, Gordon, they still was going and picking up troops all over. And when I got to Ogden, I discovered that I was awful sick. I discovered I was pregnant.
How long had you been married?
About 2 months.
2 months?
Let's see. We got married on the 22nd of June, 1945. And Mel was born in April of 1946. So that's... and we went to Portland and stayed in Portland. And then the ship had to go back again, so I came home to Ogden and stayed with my mother and father. And Gordon got home, got back and was able to be with me when Mel was born. And then he had to keep sailing till all the troops was brought home. And I can't really remember. We moved to Provo in 1947. And that's when we built our home.
What's the story about?
On 3rd North, right next to Grandma and Grandpa's house.
Did you want to move to Provo?
What? No, I didn't want to move to Provo. Because I'd been living in all big cities for a long time. Because previous to the time I got married, I went on a mission. And I was in all of our mission was... Chicago was the headquarters. My mission president was Leo J. Muir, who was, before he was the president of that mission, he had been the superintendent of schools in the state of Utah. He was the very first superintendent of schools in the state of Utah. And then I was stationed in Springfield, Illinois. And my first companion was Levon Meeks from Canada. Levon Hadley was a lady that was on the desk in the beauty shop I worked in Ogden. And we met a lot of wonderful people in Springfield. And to this day, two of the girls came west, stayed with us after I got home. And she lives here in Provo, and I see her occasionally now. Her name was Muriel Bywater. Her name is Muriel Bywater now, but she was married to Ward Hill at first. And then her sister Betty lives in Nephi. And so I haven't seen her for quite a long time. Let's see, where am I?
What did you think when Grandpa told you he wanted to move to Provo?
Well, Gordon came and said, well, maybe we were sitting and having at the dinner table, and Gordon said to him, well, Mavis and I's going to move to Provo. I went down to Geneva and got me a job today, and I jumped up and said, I'm not going to that rinky-dink town. After all, I'd been all over the United States. I'd been in Chicago was my headquarters. Oh, and I must go back to when I went to New York one time. I went to New York, and Gordon said, now you can't run around the city, because if you do, you'll get lost. So for 3 days, I sat in that room, and I decided I'd go for a walk. And I walked in, and I was surprised that there were so many men that had become beauty operators, because I hadn't seen them in Utah. However, I went into another one, and I walked up to an elderly lady standing at the desk, and she said, can I help you? And I said, I'm a beautician, I'm from out of state, and I really need a job. And she said, do you smoke? I said, no, I'm a Mormon, don't believe in it. And she hired me. She didn't even ask me how many years or any time that I had been an operator. So one day, she gave me a lot of nice people. And one day, I put my check down, and one of the girls seen it. And she grabbed it, and she said, well, I've been here longer than you. And you're making more money than I am. And I says, well, Doris, I don't spend any time in the alley smoking while you're out there having a cigarette and maybe ruining your lungs. I'm making money. But it didn't seem to change because she just kept on smoking. And I would like to know, I'd like to be able to contact her and see that if she's still doing beauty work at 87 years old. Mm-hmm. After we was in Portland, we went to San Francisco, and I stayed with Jean Ann for a while, and then I got sick, so then that's when I come to Ogden. And I stayed with Mother and Dad until, I can't remember exactly when the ship came home. But then Gordon still had to stay for quite some time. And finally, when he got off the ship, then he got a job at Hillfield. And one day he came home, and that's when he said we was going to move to Provo. Well, I've never been sorry, because I did. I had a beautiful little home. We had 5 children: Melvin, Lauren, Gordy, Denise, and Kelly.
What are some of your memories about raising your kids?
What?
What are some of your memories about raising your children? What were they like?
Well, they was all pretty good kids. We didn't have any trouble with them ever doing anything wrong. They went to walking and, what's the name of this school over here? Fair Junior High. Only that Lauren and Mel both went to BY High. BY Junior High and BY High. And there they both, Mel played basketball and Lauren was very, very good football player. And from there they both went to college. And then after a year or two in college, they both went on missions. Mel went to the Eastern States Mission.
He went to the Camorra mission.
The Camorra mission?
Huh?
Did he go to the Camorra mission?
Yeah, Camorra mission. That's right. He went to the Eastern States, which is a Camorra mission. And Lauren, when did you come? How soon did Mel come home before you went?
Yes,
What year did you go?
1968.
He went to French East Mission in 1952.
1968, Dad?
And where was your headquarters?
Geneva.
His
Geneva,
headquarters were
Switzerland.
in Geneva in 1968.
In Switzerland? Geneva, Switzerland? In
68.
68.
Mm-hmm.
In the meantime, Melvin married
Janet.
What was her last name?
Peterson.
Janet Peterson.
She married Janet Peterson. And they live in Centerville now, and they had 3 children. 4. Oh, I forgot Ty. Ty, I love you. The 3 oldest are married, and Ty recently married in the last year or 2. And I'm not sure how many grandchildren they got. Do you know, Lauren?
No, they have about.
Lauren
6.
went, after Lauren came home off his mission, he went to college. And I can't remember when you married Dana.
1973.
1973. And they had 8 children. Forrest,
Amanda. Ben.
and then Audrey. No,
April.
and then
Kira.
and then the twins.
And then Alex.
Oh, and then Alex. The twins was Audrey and Andrea, which they're all scattered all over the United States. And the sweet girl Andrea is here trying to make me think, and I'm too old to think. I'm frustrated, in other words.
You're doing great. Don't even look at it. Just look at me.
We had a beautiful home. Can't see a picture of it, can you? Did I say where I was born?
Yes.
Okay.
Tell me about your other children, Gordy and Denise and Kelly.
Gordy was married and had 2 boys, and they was later divorced. Denise met a young man from Arizona while she was going to college. They had family home evening every Monday night in our backyard on 3rd North. And that's where she and Martin got acquainted. And so they finally got married and lived with us. The first, well, while I went to college, in those 2 years, they had Anna and Edward. And they lived with us, and those two kind of grew up in our home. Edward now is on a mission in Brazil. And here, a few months ago, I got a letter from him. And he said, Grandma, I want you to be in Arizona when I come home, and you'd better be there. He's almost like my own son, he and Anna, because they lived with us for so long. Then Denise had 2 other boys, Eric and Russell. And Eric is in high school and Russell's in junior high. Anna married a nice young man from BYU that she met, and they done their courtship in our home here in Provo. They now live in the state of Washington, and he's going to school to become a pharmacist, and she finished her schooling at BYU, and she teaches school. Lauren had 8 children.
What about Kelly?
Oh, Kelly. Well, Kelly was kind of a vagabond. He got married, had 2 children, and that didn't last. And he went,
He went where?
He finally went to New York. He met a girl on the internet, and he finally went up going to New York. And they got married. They had a little boy, and that didn't work out. So Kelly, her mother told Kelly to come back here, that he didn't belong back in New York. Now, a few months later, she came out here, and within the next year or 2, she and Kelly got married. Their ages are a little spaced, but they have a wonderful marriage. And last year, what was last year? 205. They went to the temple, on a sail in the temple. She joined the church. She was a very nice person and had been raised in a very nice religious home. And she's made life for Kelly very wonderful. So I'm very proud of their situation. At the present time, we moved from our house, and the boys built an apartment house on our property. And we built a house about 3 blocks south, and in it was a beauty shop. And so I still, at 87 years old, am doing beauty work, and I live in part of the beauty shop is part of my house. I mean, it's part of my living room, I guess you'd say.
Grandma, how did you teach your children the gospel?
Well, because I had been on a mission, I began to urge the children, and especially the boys, to go on a mission, to prepare themselves. But Gordon was a big influence on the boys. He always made sure that they went to church and that they went to their priesthood meetings. And Gordon was a very understanding and loving father and a wonderful husband. He worked real hard in a lot of jobs. He always had 2 jobs. And but he still had it hanging for the service. So one day he said to me, they want me to come back in the service, and if I do, it'll mean that we won't have any more vacations. And I said, well, who vacationed more than I did? Oh, I got to go back clear to the time I went to New York. When I went to New York, Gordon told me that I couldn't go roaming around the city. And for 3 days I sat in that room and I thought, no. So I went looking through beauty shops. And that's where I seen too many men. Did I tell about going to... Well, so
Yeah,
that
you told us.
that was a testimony to me, because I got a job because I didn't smoke. So we came home, built the house, and Lauren, how old was you when we built that house? Was
I
you,
wasn't born yet.
huh?
He wasn't
wasn't
born
born.
yet, he says.
You wasn't born there?
He wasn't born yet when you built
You
the
built the house
house.
2 years before I was born.
Oh, we built the house 2 years before you was born, huh?
Yeah.
Oh.
What family traditions did you have?
Like what?
What did you do together? What are some of your favorite
Oh.
memories of having fun with your family?
Oh, well, after we built our home, we had a beautiful backyard. And we used to love to have our kids and our grandkids come. And on the 4th of July, because we was close to the parade route, why, we usually had our dinner. We had our lunch. We had a big picnic, I guess you say, in our backyard. And everybody went to the parade, but I stayed home and got ready for the picnic. And for years, I can't remember what year that was, but we still get together. We moved from, what year did they build that house? Do you remember, Lauren?
Which house?
The apartments.
Well, that was 4 years ago, so 2001.
When?
2001.
2001. We bought a house 3 blocks down from where our home was. And it had a beauty shop in it, and I now live in part of the beauty shop. I have an apartment in part of the beauty shop. And that's on 150 North, 3rd East.
Grandma, what's motherhood like?
What?
What is motherhood like?
Well, to me it was wonderful. The one thing I will say, that I think Gordon was such a good influence on the boys, and we never had any trouble with any of them. Kelly got to be a little wandering in his later years, but he soon came back home, and now he's settled down and has a nice marriage, and he's in the presidency of the high priest quorum, and he has really developed into a young man. And Melvin is a greenskeeper for big places. I don't know what you'd call them big, but he takes care of golf courses. Lauren works for 2 schools, BYU, and Melvin had 4 children, and I've lost track of how many grandchildren they've had. Lauren was married to Dana. What's your last name?
Swallow.
Huh?
Dana Swallow.
Oh, Dana Swallow. And they had 8 children.
Yeah.
However, the marriage, they soon parted ways. Works at BYU and at UVSC. At the present time, he's had a foot operation, and he comes and watches television in his dad's wheelchair.
How do you feel about your children?
I love them all. I feel like they've grown to be very nice people. They're all active in the church.
What would you want them to learn from your example?
Well, I don't know. I sometimes wonder if I was a good example. I tried, but my husband was such a great guy that I think maybe they gained as much from him as they did from me. I have one daughter who naturally lives in another state. She lives in Arizona. But the thing I've been grateful for is they've all stayed active in the church, which is very important. They're all have good educations. Kelly did not really go to much college, but the others did. Well, Gordy didn't go to a lot either. Gordy's first marriage was not very good.
Grandma?
But he's married to a very, very nice person, a girl and that lady now, and he's very happy.
How do you feel about the gospel of Jesus Christ?
Well, I grew up in it. My father was a bishop. My father was a bishop all the years I lived at home. He was a bishop for 23 years, and I never knew anything different, only that I should follow the Lord. A lot of times in my life, when I was young, that I was not able to go to places where some of my friends went. And I was the only girl that finished high school from my hometown. They either got married or sometimes one or two of the families moved away. And so when I was about 10 years old, my mother would get me to try to help curl her hair with curling irons, old-fashioned curling irons. And so then one time I said, let me try doing pin curls like they do. I've seen how they do pin curls. So I'd pin curl my mother's hair every Sunday or Saturday, and so that it'd be okay. So then I got to doing everybody's hair in Woodruff. And so Mother said to me when I graduated before I graduated from high school, I'll borrow the money. This is during the Depression. And I'll borrow the money from my mother's estate. And then we'll send you to beauty school. But before you do anything else, we have to pay that money back. So I was lucky to get a job, and I'd only been in beauty school for 7 months, and it really took 9 months to graduate. I would go down for theory every morning, but then I went to work for a lady by the name of Ardith Mimmet, and she had been an operator for years, and she really took me under her hand and taught me an awful lot, and she made me love the business. I worked for 3 years for her, and then I turned 22, and so then I grew up with the idea that a mission was important in my life. So that at that time, we did not change recommends. And my recommend was still in Woodruff, where I was born. So I went back. In the meantime, I had met Gordon. And course, I didn't tell him I was going to go on a mission. And so Father called me up and he says, Mavis, you have to come out this weekend because it's the only weekend that you could come over to, or you could have. Because I already had my call to go to the Northern States Mission, which was in Chicago. And so I had met Gordon in the meantime, and I didn't tell him what I was going to do. And he said to me, what are we going to do for the weekend? And I said, well, I don't know what you're going to do, but I'm going to Woodruff. You leaving?
Yeah, I'm gonna go.
You don't want to stay here and correct me?
No, that's okay. You're doing fine.
Okay, I'm proud of you.
Thanks.
Are you coming back tomorrow?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think she wants you to stay more on after you got married.
Oh, okay. Where did I leave off? Well, I had to go to New York.
Well, you've been to New York already.
Oh, haven't I? Did
How?
I say that I got a job for?
Yes, you did.
Okay.
Grandma, how do you feel about the gospel?
Oh, well, it was my life.
How
I
did
know
you?
the gospel is true. And I learned a lot, and I was happy with my mission that I had the opportunity to go out and spread the gospel.
How did you gain a testimony of Jesus Christ?
Now, I didn't hear that.
How did you gain a testimony of Jesus Christ?
Well, I can't exactly say I grew up that way, because never in my life that we didn't have family prayer, and we all took turns saying it. And so that's really, I think, the way that I became to love Christ, because we, as a family, always had to. And I grew up knowing that I had the opportunity that I could go on a mission. I had worked for 2 years before I went on my mission. And we had borrowed the money from Grandma Cook's estate. But I had that money all paid back and had enough money to go on my mission and keep me for about the first 2 or 3 months. And I lived on $35 a month all the time I was on my mission. I never exceeded what my mother and father could pay.
What's your favorite scripture?
Oh, dear. It's been so long since I thought about it. Give me the Book of Mormon, if you can find one. Or the Bible. They got to be here someplace. Are they? Well, I love the Lord. Let's see. I don't know what I've done with them. Well, wonder where they go put. When you live alone, you forget what to do and how to do it.
That's okay, Grandma. Maybe would you share your testimony with me?
You know, I haven't gone to church for so long because I have no way to go. And because I don't walk very good. However, my bishop came to see me last week. And he said he understood my situation. And he asked me to bear my testimony, and I bore him and told him that I knew the church was true. I've known it since I was a little girl. And I know that Jesus Christ was the Lord and Savior and the Master of all mankind. I have had the privilege at one time in my life to be a beautician in a beauty shop up in an apartment house. And one time, a lady from Springfield, Illinois, who had joined the church when I was there, came there, and one day I went up to do her hair. And while I was there, this nice lady came in and started to talk to us. Now, her name was Hinckley. And so Francis introduced me to her, and we was talking, and all of a sudden the door flew open. And this man said, "Is my wife down here again?" And she turned around and she said, "Oh, yes, I'm here." And anyway, they introduced me to who is now President Hinckley. And I got to at least shake his hands then. He was just one of the apostles at the time. But I feel like how privileged every time I see him on TV now or see him in person or anything. If I think how lucky I was to have shook that man's hands, because what a great man he is, and what a great leader, and how the church has grown. And the temples he's built has been marvelous, I think, for the church. I know the gospel's true. I guess I'm not doing what I should, but at least I pay my tithing, my fast offering, and I met this new bishop, and I know my neighbor up the street, she isn't able to go to church either, so she and I correspond a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
But I hope I'm living good enough life to be with my husband. His death was a big shock.
What happened?
Because he was,
What happened to Grandpa?
He was in a rest home getting over pneumonia. And they put him in a wheelchair to go into to therapy. And he was just sitting in the chair. They didn't have him strapped in or anything. And another man who was a lot bigger than he was come along, and he said to me before, just the day before this day, that I'm sure I'm going to be able to come home on Monday, and that was on a Thursday, the Thursday before. And Friday afternoon, they called me and said, "We've had to send your husband to the hospital because Thursday afternoon they called me, and they said that he had pneumonia." Well, I was right in the middle of a hairdo, and so I had to finish it, and by the time I got to the hospital, he was practically unconscious. And I said to the doctor that was that was working on him, I said, "What on earth? Why did how come he had a stroke or whatever they said?" They said, "I don't know. I was so frustrated. I didn't know what I was doing." And he said, "He didn't have a stroke. He was knocked out of his wheelchair and he's hemorrhaging from his head." And he said, "I cannot save him." And there was a nurse working there, and I had worked enough with very sick, and before they died, because I always done my customers' hair after they died. And I had worked enough to know with the morticians that people with false teeth should have their teeth in, or they just couldn't look natural without them. And I said to the nurse, "Where's his teeth? Why haven't you put his teeth in?" "Oh," she says, "I forgot them." And I said, "Give them to me." And I said, "Give me his toothbrush." And I said, "Gordon, can you open your mouth?" And he kind of opened his lips, and I put the toothbrush, the end of the toothbrush in his mouth, and pried his mouth open, and I put I had the privilege of putting his teeth in, and then I knew how to arrange his mouth so that it would look natural. So I was grateful I was there before he passed away. But finally all the children got there, and Denise flew in from Arizona, and we was all with him the day he passed away. We was all with him till he passed away. And then, of course, 3 days later, while we had his funeral, we couldn't find a place to bury him. I wanted to bury him I thought I was going to, he always said he wanted to be buried in the military, because the military wouldn't cost us anything. But he had a cousin that said, "Don't you dare put them up in that military basement. It's no." And I am glad now, but we finally buried him up in Centerville, where our oldest son Melvin lives. And I'm glad, because my father was born in Centerville. No, my father was born in Woodruff. It was his father that was born in Centerville. And I will be with a lot of people in Centerville, a lot of relatives. There's a lot of Tingies in Centerville, because there were 3 brothers that joined the church in England, and they all 3 came over here together, and they all 3 settled in Centerville, and so that's where the Tingy name originated from. And so I'm glad that I will be buried in Centerville. And I am so proud of all of my children, my grandchildren. My children have they're all well educated. I wouldn't say that Kelly got his by college. However, he did go 1 or 2 years. His first marriage, she didn't like him going to school, so eventually their first marriage failed. But he eventually went back to New York and met a young lady, but that didn't work out. But he did convert her mother, her mother told him to come to Utah. And so before he left, he got 2 young missionaries to go to her mother, and they converted her to the church. And then she came west, and then about a year ago, we all went to the temple, and they was sealed in the temple.
Grandma, what's some of your happiest memories with Grandpa after you were married?
The day I met him.
After you were married.
Well, that was almost a miracle, because one of my friends, I had a crush on another boy.
After you were married, Grandma.
Well, wait till I get to it.
Okay.
And so on my 20th, anyway, Bert had to work nights. But anyway, one of my customers said, "Let's go to a show." So we went downtown. She'd seen the show in one theater, and I'd seen one in the other. She said, "Let's go to Coconut Grove." And I said, "Oh, you don't go to Coconut Grove without a partner." And she says, "Oh, yes, you do." Well, we went in, and I remember I stood there like I shouldn't be there. And all of a sudden, some young man in a navy blue striped suit said, "Would you like to dance?" Well, I danced every dance with him. He didn't hear Mary was dancing with everybody, and I said at intermission, introduce me some of you guys you're dancing with. I said, I can't get rid of this guy. Well, just since the intermission was over, here he come. So I danced the rest of the night with him, and he wanted to take me home. And I said, no, I came with Mary and Ralph, because they live in the same apartment I do, and I'm going home with them. So when we went down to go out to the car, Mary says, Ralph will be waiting for us. And I just went down and then started out on the street, and there was Gordon. He took hold of my hand. He said, are you going my way? And she says, oh, come on. You can go home with us. So we went to a cafe, had something to eat. Gordon was a very nice host. He paid for the bill. And then he went up to the apartment with me. And finally, my roommate and her boyfriend came home. And they went off in another room. And finally, about an hour later, he came out and he said, well, I gotta go. I'm going home. And Gordon says, which way did you go? Now, I'm thinking Gordon's from New York, because he said he had just come from New York. And so I was thinking that he'd just come from New York. And he said, which way are you going? And he said, south. And he says, how far? And he says, well, I'm going 21st. And he said, Gordon says, can I go to 13th with you? And so he got up and left. And I thought, well, I'll never see him again. And the next day, I always went and worked for my aunt in the morning. And then I went to her church. So then when I came back to my apartment to go to my church at 5 o'clock, here was Gordon. And he said to me, where have you been all day? And I said, well, it's none of your business. What are you doing here? He says, you didn't go to church this morning. You didn't go to Sunday school this morning. I says, how'd you know I didn't go to Sunday school? He says, I went over to that church and waited till everybody come out, and you didn't come out. Well, when I worked for my aunt, I'd go at 7 o'clock in the morning and work for her and work until 9 o'clock. And then at 10 o'clock, I'd go to her Sunday school. But I would come back up to my apartment and go to church at night. So that's how I met Gordon. And I seen him every night. And so I went with him for all that time. And then one time he said to me, what are we going to do for the weekend? And I said, well, I don't know what you're going to do, but I'm going to Woodruff. Now, in that day, we did not change recommends.
Oh, you told me.
Yeah. So, anyway, I went on my mission. I was on my mission for 3 months. I'm walking up the street with my companion. I says, we got 2 blocks from our apartment. I said, don't look now, but there's my boyfriend's car. She says, what do you mean? I said, just something told me that's his car. Well, he went out to Woodruff and asked my parents if they wanted to send me something. And Mother said, oh, yes, I just bought her a new coat. And she said she needs a coat. And so she sent me a bunch of food. And here come a carload of elders. And they ate the food. And finally, one elder says, somebody come take me to the bus. I got to go to Dayton, Ohio. And Gordon spoke up and says, I'm going to Dayton, Ohio. You can ride with me. And he says, how much will it cost? And Gordon says, some driving time. I've driven for two days coming from Utah. So you can drive to Dayton and I'll sleep. And they took off. And then from then on, he wrote to me all the time. And finally, when I was being released, I kept telling President Muir about him. And so President Muir said, I guess you wouldn't like to go to, don't say you're going to New York to see him. He says, you'll never get to New York this close again. So you go to New York, from Chicago to New York to see New York. And I said, I eventually wound up living there for a while after we got married. And then he was called back into the Navy. And so then I come back and he went overseas. And then we had 5 kids. I haven't, I'm not sure how many grandkids. I've lost track, around 20-something, haven't I? Because your dad had 8. Amanda had 1. April had 4.
Well, those are your great-grandchildren.
Oh, that's right.
What are some of your happiest memories after getting married? After you got married, what are some of your happiest memories?
My whole life was really, really happy. I had a good business. I changed my mother-in-law's hair and went to church. And before I left church, I had 3 appointments. And that's how I started to go back to work. And when they built the house, they said I was in Ogden still working. And they said to Gordon, should we plumb the basement? And he said, well, that's going to cost me an awful lot of money, extra money. He says, yeah, but it'll cost you a lot more money if I do it after you built the house. So Gordon got back in his car, went back and says, plumb the basement. And that guy plumbed the basement perfect for a beauty shop, not even knowing that that's what would have been there. But when I called the plumber to come put my equipment and that in, he said whoever plumbed this knew exactly what to do because we didn't have to change it a bit. However, we eventually gave up that house and we moved 3 blocks and we bought a house which had a beauty shop in it, which I am still in it. I'm 70, going on 78 years old.
How do you feel about being a grandma?
I love it. And I love my kids. All you kids are so nice to me. I couldn't ask for anything as good as your kids are to me, especially you kids. Because you're here, I think. And, however, when I'm with my grandkids, I think they like me. I try to be nice to them and try to do things for them once in a while and give them when I can. And I'm proud of the boys. I think Edward is on a mission now. Denise's son's on a mission. You see, Mel, and they all went on missions but Kelly. And I've been real happy that they did. And of course, it was kind of a surprise to me when Denise came home one day and said she was going on mission. But I was glad she did. And how she met her husband was that we had such a beautiful backyard up in our other house. And every Monday night, the family homeowning group of the ward that she belonged to up at BYU had family home evening there. And that's where she got acquainted with Martin. And of course, he's been a very, very good husband to her. They have 4 children. Their oldest son now is on his mission, will be home this December. And I plan on going down for his welcome home. This is Arizona. I hate to go to Arizona, though I always come home sick. I get pneumonia down there because I can't take the air-conditioned houses. But Denise says, we won't keep her on if you'll just come. But then, I don't see why they run them in the winter, but they do. Because to me, it's just perfect weather. But I want you to know that I'm so grateful for you kids. You and Audrey and all of them have been exceptionally nice. I think how wonderful it was of Amanda when I got sick this winter. That she came down and took such good care of me. She's such a wonderful doctor now. She's a doctor, isn't she now? And I said it's so wonderful to go over to April's. I think of all these wonderful years I've spent over to April's. They, you know, they just haven't left me out of anything. So that's what I'm so grateful for, is I don't feel like I'm lonely because you don't let me feel that way. So.
Is there anything you'd like to say to Kira?
Oh,
She's
Kira.
gonna get this tape. Is there
Kira,
anything
my
you want to say
dear.
to her?
And that her two little girls, especially the girls, because they was always, and one day, they named her Lily Mae. And one day I went to get in the car and I said, well, hello, Lily. Or I said, hello, this something about, here, oh, I says, here comes Grandma Mae. And when I got in the car, she said, I be Lily Mae. And I have one grandson who was Gordy's son. And he named one of his little girls Abby Mae. Now, Mavis is a New Zealand name, came from New Zealand. My father went to New Zealand on his mission. And when he came home, and he got married, then I was the oldest girl. And he wanted to name me Roka. Well, he had two cousins says, don't name any little baby that horrible name. So he said, okay, I'll name her Mavis. And they said, well, that's better than Roka. So then we had another girl. Mother and father had another girl. And he said, anyway, the midwife said, somebody ought to name your, after one of your mothers. So she got Jenna. But then when the third girl come, we didn't even ask. And somebody said to him, well, if you got to have Roka, put Jean on it to take the curse off. But I'm like Roka. There isn't 90,000 Mavises like there is Marys. And there isn't hardly any Rokas. So, you know, you're actually one. Hand me a towel. I'm trying not to. I'm trying not to cry, but you're getting me, so I am. You kids have filled the gap over Grandpa. I don't know what I'd have done if it hadn't have been that. Because he was so good to me. He gave me more than I deserve. He done everything for me. You know, he had a girlfriend when he was on his when he went in the Navy the first time, and he sent her gifts from all over the world. The same thing he sent his mother. And when he came home, she was engaged to be married. And he was really upset, I guess. And she said, well, I didn't want to be married to a sailor. She said, and I figured you'd be a sailor all your life. And he said, well, I'm not going back. So he said, I'll give you a week. So he went back in a week, and she says, no, I can't change my mind. And he says, I thought the least she could do was give me back what I sent her, because it cost me a lot of money. But she didn't. She wouldn't give it back to him. And that's the night I met him. I went to Coconut Grove with one of my customers.
Mary,
And he walks up to me and said, "Would you like to dance?" And so I danced with him for I can't remember how many years we was married before he died. When he died, I'd have to sit down and figure it. We was. When was our 50th? What year was our 50th anniversary? And he died 5 years later.
Is it 95?
95.
1995?
Mm-hmm. And then he died 5 years later. And that's when he was in that rest home.
Thank you, Grandma,
Thank you.
for sharing with me. We love you.
But you and Jeremy and Audrey and your husband have just been so well. I can't say that they all haven't been. Even Kimberly, was the oldest grandchild, and she was at my house more than she was ever almost at home, because Janet went back to work, and I tended her so much. But I just love all the grandkids. There isn't one of them, and I'm proud of all of them. They've all stayed active in the church and everything. Even little Zachary, that we can't see only once a year. But he is a very smart child. Emma, who is his other grandmother, said that New Jersey is known for its excellent schools, and he's one sharp little boy. But they say when he comes out here, he always he remembers to go to Sunday school, because she don't have him go to any church.